My cousin tried to turn my wedding into a sponsored livestream, so I legally turned her career off mid-ceremony. I was standing at the altar, staring into the tear-filled, loving eyes of the man I was about to marry, the crisp, pine-scented mountain air filling my lungs, when a faint, blinking red LED light tucked behind a massive arrangement of white hydrangeas completely shattered my reality. I didn't gasp. I didn't cry. The deep, romantic trance of the moment evaporated instantly, replaced by the cold, surgical adrenaline of a senior strategic operations project manager realizing a rogue variable had just infiltrated her meticulously controlled environment. I don't plan parties, I engineer operational outcomes. In my professional life, I oversee multi-million-dollar software deployments for a massive international tech firm. I treat every aspect of my existence like a high-stakes product launch, and my wedding was the ultimate magnum opus. For 18 grueling months, I had architected a flawless, zero-digital mountain retreat. We had rented a completely isolated, private estate sitting at an elevation of 8,000 feet. There was absolutely zero cell service for a 30-mile radius. The only connection to the outside world was a highly secure, password-protected Wi-Fi network controlled directly by the venue, which I had personally rented out and locked down. The invitations were not cutesy, handwritten pieces of artisanal cardstock. They were encrypted digital portals. To even view the geographical coordinates of the venue, every single invited guest had to click through a multi-page document that explicitly laid out the terms of attendance. The first, bolded paragraph read, "This is a strictly unplugged ceremony. No cell phones, no cameras, no smartwatches. Any unauthorized digital recording, broadcasting, or photography is a direct breach of the event's terms of service." Almost everyone in my life understood and respected this boundary. They knew how deeply I valued privacy and authentic, unmediated human connection. But my cousin, Sienna, did not operate in the realm of authentic human connection. Sienna lived her entire existence through the blinding, artificial glow of a ring light. Sienna was a lifestyle influencer with 500,000 followers across various platforms. She was a woman who spoke entirely in internet buzzwords, possessed an artificially perfectly white smile, and utilized a fake, breathy customer service voice whenever a camera was pointed at her. She viewed every single family gathering, every funeral, every holiday dinner not as a life event, but as premium, monetizable content. She was a walking, talking copyright violation waiting to happen. She had already ruined my younger sister's college graduation by screaming at her followers to smash that like button while the dean was reading the valedictorian speech. I knew, with absolute mathematical certainty, that Sienna would attempt to violate the digital embargo on my wedding day. I didn't just ask her nicely to put her phone away. I built a trap. Embedded on page 3 of the digital RSVP portal was a digital privacy agreement. It wasn't standard wedding etiquette fluff. It was a heavily vetted, legally binding clause drafted by a corporate attorney friend of mine. It explicitly stated that any commercial monetization of the wedding's likeness, audio, or visual footprint by a guest would result in an immediate, non-negotiable $10,000 production fee owed directly to the couple. Sienna, who was historically too arrogant to read anything that didn't have her own name in the headline, digitally signed the document without a second thought, completely legally binding herself to my terms. The morning of the wedding was an absolute masterpiece of logistical execution. The sky was a piercing, cloudless blue. The string quartet was tuning their instruments on the sprawling outdoor terrace. The floral arrangements were mathematically symmetrical. As I stood at the top of the stone aisle in my heavy silk gown, the heavy wooden doors swung open, and I began my walk toward my groom. The acoustic, weeping notes of a cello floated through the air. Everything was flawless. And then, as I reached the final 3 steps to the altar, my eyes locked onto the front row. Sienna wasn't just holding a cell phone. She had escalated her narcissism to a completely psychotic, professional level. She was wearing a hidden, chest-mounted gimbal rig, partially obscured by a sheer, incredibly tacky sequined shawl that violently clashed with the elegant, subdued color palette I had mandated for the bridesmaids. And sitting right next to her was her boyfriend, Chase, a guy who called himself a creative director but was essentially just a glorified tripod. Chase was holding a sleek, black, high-gain directional shotgun microphone, angled directly up at the altar to capture our vows in pristine, high-fidelity audio. They were utilizing the venue's dedicated vendor Wi-Fi, which Sienna had clearly manipulated a catering staff member into giving her the password for, to broadcast my private, deeply intimate vows to the entire planet. I stood there, my hands shaking slightly as I gripped my bouquet, my eyes narrowing as I watched Sienna subtly lean her head down toward her chest-mounted microphone. The ambient noise of the wind dropped just enough for me to hear her raspy, manufactured influencer whisper. "I'm literally risking my life to show you guys this dress," Sienna whispered into her cleavage, her eyes darting around like a paranoid operative. "The aesthetic here is so incredibly toxic and controlling, but I had to give my girls the exclusive drop. Use code Sienna15 for 15% off the bridesmaid look." That's when the real bombshell dropped in my mind. The heat crawled viciously up my neck, and my vision went blurry with absolute rage. This wasn't just a narcissistic attempt to share a pretty mountain view with her followers. This was a calculated, highly orchestrated corporate sponsorship. She wasn't an excited cousin, she was a walking billboard. She had secured a paid brand deal with a notorious, unethical fast fashion company to do a live reveal of a cheap, polyester knockoff of my bridesmaid dresses during my actual wedding vows. I knew exactly how these specific fast fashion influencer contracts operated. To trigger the payout clause and secure her massive $5,000 promotional bonus, the live stream had to remain active and entirely uninterrupted for a minimum of 30 continuous minutes. If the stream dropped, if the connection failed, or if the platform terminated the broadcast before the timer hit 30 minutes, the contract was null and void, and she wouldn't see a single dime. She was currently 10 minutes into the broadcast. She needed 20 more minutes of my sacred, private life to cash her corporate check. I didn't stop the ceremony. I didn't break down crying. I didn't turn to the officiant and demand she be thrown out by security. That would have given her exactly what she wanted. Chaotic, viral drama that would have sent her engagement metrics through the roof. I am a project manager. I do not throw tantrums. I execute contingency plans. I slowly turned my head to the left, looking directly past the altar toward the heavy oak soundboard where my DJ, Marcus, was stationed. Marcus wasn't just a guy who played party hits, he was a former sound engineer for a major recording studio. For the last 3 months, Marcus and I had rehearsed a highly specific, heavily encrypted protocol that I affectionately titled the algorithmic executioner. I made direct eye contact with Marcus. I gave him a single, subtle thumbs up. Marcus's eyes widened in realization. He gave a sharp nod, immediately cut the feed to the acoustic string quartet's ambient microphones, and reached for a brightly colored, red-taped USB drive sitting next to his mixing board. I didn't just want to ruin her video. I knew that TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram all operated on incredibly aggressive, fully automated content ID artificial intelligence algorithms. These bots constantly scrub live broadcasts for copyrighted material. If they detect a single infringement, they might just mute the audio. But if they detect a multiple infringement scenario, specifically targeting the most notoriously litigious intellectual property holders on the planet, the automated protocols don't just mute the stream. They instantly terminate the broadcast and shadow ban the offending account for severe policy violations. I didn't just play one song. I initiated a surround sound copyright bomb. At the exact moment the officiant opened his mouth to begin the opening prayer, the massive, high-wattage venue speakers erupted. It wasn't a mistake. It was a deafening, high-fidelity, meticulously layered mashup of the 3 most aggressively protected audio signatures in the history of human entertainment. The soaring, unmistakable orchestral intro of Disney's Let It Go blasted through the right channel. Simultaneously, the iconic, piercing 8-bit chiptune of the Nintendo Super Mario Bros. Theme song ripped through the left channel. And sitting right in the heavy bass frequencies, anchoring the entire chaotic nightmare, was a pristine studio recording of Happy Birthday to You owned by the ruthless lawyers at Warner Chappell Music. The sheer, jarring dissonance of the audio hit the crowd like a physical shockwave. 400 formally dressed guests visibly recoiled, gasping in absolute horror and confusion as the screaming vocals of an ice queen violently clashed with the digital jumping sounds of an Italian plumber. But I didn't look at the crowd. I looked directly at Sienna. The color completely drained from her heavily contoured face. She frantically grabbed at her chest rig as her boyfriend, Chase, began violently tapping his smartphone screen. The automated copyright bots didn't even need 60 seconds. The proprietary algorithms from 3 different megacorporations converged on her livestream simultaneously, detecting a massive, sponsored commercial broadcast flagrantly utilizing their protected intellectual property without a licensing agreement. Because it was a triple infringement occurring simultaneously during a heavily monetized, sponsored event, the algorithmic execution was instantaneous and utterly merciless. I watched the glowing red tally light on her chest rig flicker, stutter, and completely die. Sienna's phone, which was mounted to Chase's wrist, began vibrating so violently I could hear it buzzing from the altar. The notifications were flooding in. Her stream wasn't just muted. Her entire account had been instantly ripped off the servers, slapped with a major policy violation, and completely shadowbanned, effectively freezing all 500,000 of her followers and locking her out of her own digital empire. Marcus let the ungodly copyright mashup play for exactly 45 seconds to ensure the automated bots captured the full audio fingerprint, and then smoothly faded the volume back down to absolute silence. I turned back to my groom, who was desperately biting the inside of his cheek to stop himself from laughing out loud. The officiant, completely baffled, cleared his throat. I smiled perfectly, looking out at the confused crowd. "Sorry about that, everyone," I announced clearly, my voice echoing off the silent mountains. "Just a minor technical glitch with the venue's audio system. Please, let's continue." We finished the ceremony. The vows were beautiful. The kiss was perfect. But the absolute zenith of my satisfaction occurred 2 hours later during the cocktail reception. I was standing near the towering champagne pyramid, holding a crystal flute, when Sienna came physically tearing through the crowd of guests. Her aesthetic was completely destroyed. Her fake, breathy persona was gone, replaced by raw, unhinged panic. Her makeup was actively running down her cheeks, and her cheap, fast-fashion sequin dress was already fraying at the hemline. Chase was trailing behind her, looking utterly terrified. "You ruined my entire career," Sienna screamed, entirely abandoning any semblance of wedding etiquette. Guests immediately stopped talking, turning their heads to watch the meltdown. My stream was terminated. The brand sponsor just sent me an automated contract termination email because the broadcast didn't hit the 30-minute requirement. I lost the $5,000. I lost my account. "You did that on purpose. You played that music on purpose." I took a slow, deliberate sip of my freezing cold champagne, savoring the crisp, dry bubbles popping against my tongue. I looked her slowly up and down, taking in the absolute destruction of her corporate ambition. "I explicitly told you this was an unplugged ceremony, Sienna," I replied, my voice dangerously low, stripped of any familial warmth. "I am a project manager. I don't just set rules, I build robust, foolproof systems to legally enforce them. You tried to monetize my sacred vows to sell cheap polyester garbage to teenagers. I simply introduced you to the Disney legal department. You are a psychopath," she hissed, her hands balling into fists. "I am going to sue you for lost wages. That brand deal was my entire income for the month. You owe me $5,000. I smiled, a cold, deeply satisfying smirk stretching across my face. I reached into the hidden pocket of my custom silk wedding gown, pulled out a heavily folded piece of premium cardstock, and handed it to her. It was a printed copy of the digital privacy agreement she had blindly signed on the RSVP portal. "Actually, Sienna, the mathematics work in the exact opposite direction," I whispered, stepping forward so my face was inches from hers. "By bringing professional broadcasting equipment onto this property and attempting to secure commercial compensation using my likeness, you explicitly triggered the penalty clause of the binding contract you digitally signed last month. I will be sending your official invoice for the $10,000 production fee to your management email on Monday morning. I expect it paid in full within 30 net days. Now get out of my venue before I have security forcefully escort you and your tripod off the mountain." Sienna stared at the printed contract, her mouth opening and closing like a suffocating fish. She looked at Chase, who immediately took 2 steps backward, completely abandoning her in the face of actual legal consequences. Without another word, she turned around, her cheap dress rustling loudly, and practically sprinted toward the parking lot, crying hysterically into her hands. The fallout over the next 6 months was an absolute masterpiece of systemic destruction. The fast fashion brand didn't just terminate her contract. When my professional wedding photographer eventually posted the gorgeous, high-resolution, heavily edited photos of our wedding online, a massive internet commentary channel found the images of Sienna lurking in the background wearing the altered, butchered fast fashion dress. Because she had hacked the dress apart with scissors to show more cleavage, it looked completely absurd and trashy next to the high-end elegance of the venue. The fast fashion brand, terrified of the negative PR associating their clothing with tacky wedding crashers, actually issued a public statement distancing themselves from her, claiming she violated their own brand quality standards. Her digital empire completely crumbled. Because the algorithmic execution during my wedding counted as a massive corporate intellectual property violation, it served as her third strike on the platform. After her 48-hour shadow ban lifted, she logged back back in only to discover that her account was permanently demonetized. She couldn't run ads. She couldn't join the creator fund. Her massive follower count was rendered entirely, financially useless. She was essentially a ghost haunting a digital graveyard. As for my invoice, I didn't let it slide. When the 30 days passed and she refused to pay the $10,000 penalty, I didn't argue with her. I simply filed a lawsuit in small claims court. The trial lasted exactly 22 minutes. Sienna showed up wearing a beige pantsuit, trying to bat her eyelashes and play the victim, claiming it was just a family misunderstanding. Her cheap lawyer tried to argue that an RSVP portal couldn't possibly be considered a binding legal document. The judge, a stern, older man with absolutely zero patience for internet influencer nonsense, took one look at the heavily encrypted, IP-logged, geographically timestamped digital signature she had submitted to access the venue coordinates. He looked at the explicit, highlighted text of the commercial penalty clause. Then, he looked at the printed screenshots of her live stream clearly showing her advertising a discount code and actively attempting to monetize the event. He banged his gavel and legally ordered her to pay me the full $10,000, plus court costs. I received the cashier's check 6 weeks later. I didn't put it in savings. I didn't use it to pay off the wedding catering. My new husband and I used the exact funds extracted from my cousin's ruined brand deal to completely fund a lavish, 2-week, first-class second honeymoon in Tokyo. And on the third day of our trip, we made sure to spend an entire, glorious afternoon riding the roller coasters at Tokyo Disneyland, silently thanking their notoriously aggressive legal department for providing the ultimate algorithmic execution. As I sit here looking back at the photos from that day, completely devoid of any glowing cell phone screens or obnoxious influencers ruining the background, I sometimes think about Sienna, sitting in her bedroom with a dead ring light, realizing that she permanently sacrificed her entire career for a cheap brand deal she didn't even get paid for. Am I the monster here, or did she get exactly what she deserved?
If you have made it this far and want to see more videos like this, then kindly subscribe and turn on notifications so you may never miss another story like this.